this point, let's get into demolition and disposition. This webinar will discuss how the NSP Closeout Notice issued 2 weeks ago impacts disposition and demolition activities. We'll focus on how these activities have changed and what cannot be done in light of the Closeout Notice. Concerns about properties and land banks and properties acquired and demoed without an NSP-eligible use will benefit from learning about new policies on these matters. This webinar is for all NSP grantees and their partners. So our main presenter today is Jennifer Hilton, and she's on the NSP team at HUD headquarters. In addition to other NSP responsibilities, Jennifer is very involved in the policy development and support, as you'll learn today. Also with us are the familiar voices of other members of the NSP team, and from got John Leswick and David Noguera and Hunter Kurtz and Jesse Hanforth-Combe. I think will be here for at least part of the session. So welcome to all of you. And at this point, let me turn over to Jennifer Hilton. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Demo Disposition webinar. We tried to do this before. Some of you may have been with us back, we'll just say a while ago when we did a webinar on demolition before. Basically, it just brought up a lot of issues that we weren't thinking about, some interesting policy questions that we needed to answer. So we kind of went to the drawing board, started over. So that's where we're at now. We've issued the closeout notice, which had some changes in there, that demolition and disposition. So we feel we're in a good place to have this discussion now. Your questions that you'll bring today will even help us more when we put out a policy guidance after this webinar. We're going to talk about the following, some of these ideas we know grantees are thinking about. I talked about the closeout notice affecting demolition activities, so we're going to talk about how that changes affect demolition. What are your options for disposing of NSP-assisted properties? Again, some of that was in the closeout notice. Additional options, so we'll talk about those. And what if you acquired a property but can no longer pursue your plan for that property? What are your options? So we're going to talk about that as well. Let's start with the closeout notice changes. The biggest change that happened in the closeout notice, you read that whole thing from cover, see that we added acquisition to eligible use D. Eligible use D allows you to demolish blighted properties, and prior to the closeout notice being published, the eligible CDBG activity in that column was clearance and demolition. That was it. When we realized that grantees were acquiring for demolition, and they had that as an eligible CDBG activity, so we did that. We also did special economic development activities as an eligible activity under eligible use B for all NSP programs, and you can also do special economic development activities under eligible use E and NSP 1. And that we also added the jobs national objective, since that's objective you can meet with the economic development. Start with sort of general principles. When we're talking about all these different things, we want to always keep in mind these 3 basic principles, that anything you do with NSP money, it's got to meet, it's got into an eligible use category, those 5 eligible use categories that I'm sure you all know by heart by now. Also, it has to be an eligible CDBG activity. So talking about this earlier, if you look at your notices, you'll see a big table, somewhere NSP 1, 2, or 3 notice, and see that you've got eligible uses on the left of the table, CDBG eligible activities on the right. So we've got to hit both of those. And then you always have to meet a national objective. All right, this is something we also wanted to drive home. So many questions about it. In NSP 2 and 3, there's a really restricted use of eligible use E. So if you're developing a property in eligible use E, it's developed for housing because that's the way it was written in the law. So if you acquire a vacant property that doesn't meet any other property eligibility, it can't meet the foreclosed, abandoned, or blighted property eligibilities. Stuck in eligible use E. And stuck in eligible use E, you've got to develop it for housing. I bring this up from time to time when we talk about all these dispositions. This is the one time when really the only option you have is housing. So specifically demolition as an end use, maybe acquisition, maybe you didn't acquire. Either way, we're going to talk about how you meet a national objective. You did acquire. Later on in the presentation, we'll talk about subsequent uses after you've acquired and demolished. And then this focus specifically on how demolition works with housing activities. Yeah. Here are all objectives. Everyone should know these. Our national objective, your LH25 for your set aside. You can also meet an area benefit, or now we have jobs benefit. Didn't include limited clientele, which is also a national objective you meet. And just to keep in mind, since we're talking a little bit about demo here at first, use the some blight urgent need national objective that you can in the CDBG program. You've got to focus on the ones here on this slide. Okay, so how do you meet a national objective with demolition? If you're just one single demolition in a neighborhood and that's it, then you show how you've eliminated conditions detrimental to public safety and health. So there were things could fall on people if someone entered the home, maybe uses a drug house, but basically if it poses a safety hazard for people passing by, you can meet an area benefit on one single demo. If you're doing more than one demo and you're doing it you've got a comprehensive neighborhood strategy, it's going along with preservation of units, so you're not just demolishing, you're preserving some units too. You can identify the area where this is happening, then you have a national objective that way, so you don't have to go property by property saying how it was a public safety if you're this neighborhood approach. I want to mention too, before we move on, actually you can go to the next slide. But I do, whether it's one demolition or a cluster demolition, if you're not acquiring property, if you're just properties, they're eligible for demolition, you demolish them. We've said that if investment in the property to demolish it is over $25,000, you need to place on that property, and that's just to make sure you're protecting your investment. Since it is, we kind of consider that a significant amount after $25,000.
Yeah, and some of these points will be in the guidance that Jennifer mentioned. We didn't want to try to clog up the highway too much, but we did also want to hold back on that guidance to make sure that we had all the questions answered that you might have. So
right,
that'll be out pretty soon.
Yeah. So, once you've and demolished a property, you've shown you met a national objective either through the public safety or through this clustered approach. Okay, what happens? What do you want to do with that property? We're going to talk about that in the disposition part of the guides. So we'll be discussing all those options as we move forward. We think most of you guys know this. We just want to keep it on here to go over really fast. So just make sure that when talking about debt as an allowable cost under Reconstruction, so we're talking about eligible use B, purchase and rehab homes and residential properties. These are abandoned or foreclosed properties. The key is that these properties don't have to be blighted as long as the clearance, the demolition is an integral part of that reconstruction, and you're going to do it immediately. So it's all one big activity. You're going to demolish and you're going to start reconstructing that property. That way you don't have to qualify this under eligible use D separately. It all goes under eligible use B. It makes it a lot for you. The key is reconstruction. So when we issue policy guidance, there's this memo on reconstruction for CDBG. You can see exactly what it needs to be reconstruction, but it's essentially you're rebuilding it in the same manner. You're not adding units, but maybe the rooms change a little bit, but it's the same number of units. So now, if you're doing, it's the exact same thing, but you're doing new construction, and you're under eligible use E. I guess this could also be reconstruction as well under eligible use E, since there's a there. It kind of just depends on if your property meets property type. So if it's a vacant property and you're doing construction or new construction, it would be under eligible use E. Again, the debt is part of the reconstruction, part of the new construction. It's all one activity. You don't have to separately or qualify it separately as happening at the same time. If you demolish property and you're sitting on it for a few years and you're thinking, I think we'll build housing, but we're going to wait a little bit for the market to turn around, building it yet, you've got to qualify that demo separately. So you've got to meet a national objective on the demolition in that case. But if you're demolishing and then building housing and it's all activity, you're fine.
Okay. One other fine point on that is that typically demolition is not covered by Davis-Bacon, but if you do it this way in conjunction with the reconstruction or the new construction, then it's considered to be part of that construction, and therefore it would be, well, if the construction itself is covered by Davis-Bacon, 8 or more units, then the demolition would be part of that too.
We've included these tables through PowerPoint just to sort of have a place to sum everything up. You can take these, and maybe this is an easier way to just get the information quickly. So it tells you what we've gone through so far, so demolition as an end use, and then demolition for housing activities, focus on the property types, and then the national objective that you're going to meet.
Right.
So we're going to talk about what if you're demolishing a property in a land bank. So basically in this case, properties in a land bank do have to be foreclosed residential properties. So you have that restriction. No matter what, you've got to meet that first. And this case is where we've got to meet it separately, buckets. So we use C, it's got to be a foreclosed residential property to land bank, and then an eligible use D, it's got to be blighted to demolish it. So you've got to classify, these properties have to be classified as both blighted and foreclosed upon residential properties to do this. You could object it the same way. MO, you know, the national objective for land bank is a little bit different, and you required to have reuse within 10 years of the closeout agreement that everyone's going to sign when they close out their grant. Talk a little bit more about how that works.
Right. If you didn't catch this the last time, it is the 10-year clock starts at the day you sign your closeout agreement, rather than the multiples you may have acquired your properties over the last few years. So we just thought it would be much simpler that way. So then this line here is that you demolish the property. In most cases, if you've acquired it also, then you still want to dispose of it. There may be some public uses that you keep it in, but from here, the demolished properties are going to follow the same path that that any property follows that you're disposing of it. So, but we did add some specific end-use options that were not available for land banks previously. And as you can see, they're somewhat wide open in terms of allowing various kinds of public or nonprofit uses for open space. The other thing you do is put it into a community land trust, which is a way to assure that you will have you will meet a national objective, because community land trust is going to have income limits on the homes that may get built there. But to me, that was one that seemed a little bit maybe a little bit useful in places where the market is so slow that you're just not sure when that housing may come, but you want to be able to designate something that meets a national objective. And so you don't have to wait 10 years to do these things. I mean, if you have a community land trust and you can just deed this there, you can get it all finished and not be tracking every property for the next X years. So, assuming you're a CDBG grantee, you can put it to use in your CDBG program. Would imagine if you're a nonprofit in a CDBG community, you could probably donate it for that purpose or something too. And then for affordable housing, to meet the Housing and Economic Recovery Act requirements. So this doesn't say all the words that are in the notice, but those things tell you that, those words tell you that this isn't just a promise to do housing, but this is actually housing that somebody's already starting to work on. So they're already doing feasibility analysis or something like that. So it's not just a name; it's an actual designation, and then included in a redevelopment plan that's approved by the local governing body. Again, something that is an active redevelopment plan. So the other is also dispose of these land bank properties in the same. You can dispose of other properties in the program that we're going to go through in the next few minutes. So, just to summarize, it has to meet be an eligible use, has to be an eligible activity, and it has to meet an objective. So once you do those, and I'm hoping that once we're finished here, you'll have kind of that pattern down. But if you keep repeating that mantra to yourself.
Yeah, and we'll talk about specifically what you can do for disposition under each eligible use. So we'll cover that sentence says any subsequent use. It probably should say, we'll be specific on what you can do under this land bank eligible use.
Right. So this is the statement in the closeout notice that any properties that are still in the land bank after the 10-year clock has expired will refer to the CDBG program and must be used immediately to meet a national objective. So, I think, well, I guess we can see in a couple of seconds with the questions, but to give you a realistic and achievable way to have every property get out of the program and into some productive use. And that, was it both consistent with the original intent and also feasible from the standpoint of the real estate economics in your community. So I think this is where we're going to stop for questions.
Yeah, questions, Kent. Maybe we could take a few.
Sure. So again, this is how you can ask questions. Two ways to do that. If you've got a question for either Jennifer or John on any of the topics they've touched on so far, demolition as an end use, demolition for activity, disposition, or not disposition, but land bank, sorry. Go ahead, raise your hand or submit in the queue. And we do have a question from CP, and I'll unmute you now, CP. Are you there? Hi, go ahead.
Clarification relative to the land bank properties that they can be used as eligible public improvements regardless if the property was acquired using NSP-2 or NSP-3 funds. I thought all NSP-2 and NSP-3 acquired properties could only be used for housing. Does the closeout notice change this, or am I interpreting it incorrectly?
Well, we haven't gotten there yet. Probably Sherry is the problem, but you can't eligible use E in NSP 2 and 3, which I think is what you're asking. So it's going to depend on what use your falls into. So some restrictions. The land bank stuff.
If you bought a property and eligible use and put it in land bank, and you've been just holding it, charging disposition and holding it, and then you're going to sell the property, or disposition is you use the sale or disposition is an eligible activity to walk through the pattern, and the distance is going to meet a national objective based on how the property is used. If you put funds in there and pay for the property to be a park, you need to find, it needs to be a park that meets a MMA national objective.
Right, and that we'll talk about that.
Right, but since banks are UC, anything in a bank can come out of the bank and be used for these kinds of activities if it's a national objective. Go into a little bit more, but there are some parameters. But anything that's in a land bank can come out by using disposition as the eligible activity. Okay, other questions?
Thanks for that question, CP. And at the moment, there are other questions. So let me hand you all back. And there you go.
Okay, so we're going to move on to disposition. This is kind of the meat of, I think, the presentation today. And we've tried to think of the best way to present this and kind of see disposition in 3 different ways. First way is just an eligible expense and an eligible activity. So you're going to have disposition costs, and what activity you do, you're probably going to have these costs.
Like rehab.
Right. Any activity, you're going to have disposition costs. One way where it's just sort of in activity, there are times when disposition is the eligible activity and it's also the end use. Really, the only case that fits into the example is when you're disposing of a property for a side lot, and we'll talk about that in more detail when we move on. But really, it's kind of the only way disposition is your eligible activity and end use, and also meet a national objective. And then the case is sort of this new. John's mentioned it on other webinars for people who are listening to those. Part of our new policy interpretation of allowing disposition to be an eligible activity where you can dispose of a property for an ineligible end use that meets a national objective. So basically what Jesse was describing, earlier with using a park as an example, that's kind of what we're talking about. We're going to go in depth in that as well, so we'll explain all of these. I wanted to give you the citation for where this comes from in the CDBG regs. You can find position at 570-201B, and there's the regular.
Well, what you need to get from this is the open nature of the way that you can dispose of it, through sale, lease, donation, or otherwise. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you can throw it. You can throw it at somebody.
Long-term easement.
Yeah. So the thing is, you don't have to make your money back on all these things. There are going to be a couple cases where maybe you do, but for the most part, you can dispose of property at a substantial discount. So and many of you are already doing that, and maybe you're nervous about it. So
these main kind of buckets we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about public facilities, just some examples, community gardens, community center, that kind of stuff, neighborhood centers. We're also going to talk about economic development activities, special economic development activities that are now eligible under certain eligible uses, and then we'll go into detail on side lots. So we're just going to talk about how all these work, whether they're eligible or ineligible, and how you can dispose of properties this way.
But it's really critical to remember that while eligible to dispose of the property into these projects, any of these projects, it's not eligible to put any additional funds into.
Right. That's the third disposition option that we're going to talk about.
Right. And then this project is just a nice combination of community and side lots, which is the Heidelberg project in Detroit, which is really got like more than houses, but it's all full of interesting stuff. So we'll get going into the details here.
So focus on the first scenario where disposition is just an allowable expense in an eligible activity. So in NSP 1, we're going to talk about public facilities and then special development activities as well, and how disposition is just sort of an expense as part of a bigger activity, eligible activity. Yeah. Okay. Facilities. Everyone hopefully by now knows that this is an eligible activity under NSP 1 on use E. So they've got to be demolished or vacant properties that you're redeveloping as a public facility. So disposition is just a cost in the public facility activity.
Right. Everything pretty much gets subsumed up to the end eligibility we go to, and in this case, this is a house in Pomona that was transformed into a small community center.
And in the CDBG program, and now in NSP, to see disposition as a standalone activity, partly because normally we'll dispose for an eligible activity and call the activity
what it is.
What the activity is being disposed for. Mm-hmm. You just pay the disposition cost to get your economic development program going, or you pay the disposition cost to, as part of a rehab reconstruction or whatever. And so that's when you would just see disposition as an allowed cost inside a special economic development program.
Right. So you're probably already doing anyway. We just kind of want to show you ways to think about disposition, and this is
just the thing. When we say AC rehab, we actually call those rehabilitation. They're actually usually acquisition, clearance, rehabilitation,
right.
Disposition activities, but everybody just calls them rehab. Right,
exactly.
Right. That's the whole thing about being an allowable expense in an eligible activity. So the disposition just kind of gets buried in there, and that's fine.
The same case for special economic development activities. So closeout notice lets you do this now for all NSP under eligible use B, and for NSP 1 you can do it under B and E. And something we wanted to kind of mention here was if you're doing economic development activities under use B and you have, that's pretty straightforward. But it's reconstruction, so you're doing demolition first, and you're, then rebuilding, and it's an economic development activity. You probably want to talk to, or you do want to talk to your field rep.
We haven't seen any examples of these yet, and we need to understand a little bit more if this is happening. If you acquired a abandoned house under eligible use B and you were going to reconstruct it, our rehab and reconstruction don't really fit very well with sort of the mixed use or bringing back a residential as a mixed use. Because it's linked to something HERA. If we see some examples, we can maybe build some policy and understand better if it's happening at all. If it's not, we're not going to worry about it.
Right.
Yeah, the normal CDBG program, you have more limitations on commercial buildings. You can only do the exterior, or there's some limitations you don't have on residential use. So
we're going to talk about this in the next few slides in more detail, but basically you're either meeting the objective through jobs, through area, or again, limited clientele, which we left off, but we'll talk about that.
Kind of rare.
Yeah. Use specific examples, since this is new to a lot of grantees, especially NSP2 grantees who are nonprofits who haven't maybe been doing this. We just give you some examples. So, in order to meet a national objective with your economic development activity, it's got to be located in a predominantly low-income, middle-income neighborhood and serve the residents of that neighborhood. So the example we had was a parking lot for a grocery store that serves the residents of the neighborhood.
We've seen some lots in the past, and this might be kind of about the scale that you would actually be able to operate on. So say this house that's next to the grocery store is one that you acquired and you end up tearing it down because it's not safe. That could become parking for the grocery store. You could do the grocery store also.
Right.
Be a little more expensive, but that's a possibility. Most of these would be outside of NSP1, Use E. Most of these are going to be foreclosed residential properties under Use B, so that your path is going to be somewhat limited there.
And remember that you can't just build a parking lot and say, all right, we met a national objective because it's a low-mod area. You've got to make sure you're defining the area and documenting what the area is and how it's benefiting from the activity. The second one is, okay, we finally remembered limited clientele. So this is involving facilities designed for use predominantly by low and moderate middle income persons. And this example is a for-profit clinic designed to serve patients on Medicaid or welfare. So because it's specifically designed for those patients, you can qualify it as a limited clientele national objective.
But I think, keep in mind that it could be for-profit, so
right.
It doesn't, you have some latitude here. It's not all public works. And then
jobs national objective, which we did in the closeout notice, and it's basically the activity has to involve the employment of persons, the majority of whom are going to be low, mod, or middle income. And these things, remember, it's NSP, so it goes up to 120% of AMI.
Just remember that there are a lot of situations here where you can put the land in, but you can't put NSP money in.
Right.
There are a few situations where you're going to be able to put NSP money in. If you have any doubt whatsoever, talk to the field office or put in and ask a question, and we'll help you sort out your project. Right.
Talk about when you can't put your money in. And this example is, a home daycare center that creates or retains jobs. You could take a house that you're rehabbing and turn it into a home daycare. So it would be an easy way to meet a good way national objective.
Or, so I guess another would be that you could sell this house to an upper income person who employs lower income people
right.
who work in the daycare center, and they live in a house and they.
Right.
It's a
way to do that.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have to look at the full range of benefit and the full range of direct effects, but if it's going to be used for the house is going to be used for the daycare center, I don't think we care as much who owns it.
Right. Well, G has some stuff about owners too, so it's not past the income of the owner to the
right. If
workers.
At least 51% is low net.
Right. That's right. 50% of jobs. So now we're about the second scenario, which is essentially where disposition is the eligible activity in end use, because we're talking about disposing as a side lot. Allowable for NSP programs under use B, C, or D. And then NSP1, you could also throw it under eligible use E because it's disposition. So disposition is an eligible activity in all those eligible uses. Vacant or demolished properties can be made available to your adjacent residential homeowners. You can donate it. You can sell it. If you sell it, it's program income. I want to be really clear on this because I feel like like we've gone a little back and forth in the past about what we've said on objectives with side lots. So this is definitive guidance. Will meet an area national objective, not housing national objective. So it's all how you donating that property is going to benefit the area. So you've got to define the area. I think we talk about it if you want to go to the next slide a little more specifically. So basically, the acquisition and the demolition just need to determine and document the actual service area benefiting from that disposition. If you acquire or demolish that property, you show how you met a national objective with that demolition, which will include the acquisition. Talked about the clustered or the single demo, how a national objective there. And then when you dispose the property as a side lot in NSP, it will continue to meet the area national objective. So you just want to make sure, though, that you're documenting that. So it doesn't matter that the income does not matter. It matters that it's a low mod area and benefiting the area, and that you can document that somehow. Because it's not a housing unit, you're not making any housing units, it's not a national objective, there are no affordability requirements associated with the side lot.
Right. So that's tripped some people up in the past. So it's a side lot and it's not housing, so there's no affordability requirement.
Right.
But I think this is important area benefit too, because I think it's a more realistic way to look at it. It's also, I think, a more easy way to achieve that national objective.
This is the third case. Jesse keeps mentioning when you can't use NSP funds for an activity. That's what we're talking about here. We're going to be really specific about what you can do. So the eligible activity is disposition, but the property is being disposed for an ineligible end use that meets a national objective. So this is our property guidance, and they're going to meet all these criteria in order to do this. So you can dispose of a property acquired or demolished for ineligible activities. Use such properties for NSP ineligible activities as long as NSP ineligible activity is not assisted with NSP funds. So if you acquired and demolished a property, you met a national objective, that's great. Now you want to do something on that property that maybe is ineligible in NSP but meets an objective, and we're going to give a couple examples later. That property, and you can't use NSP funds to develop, to actually do the development for something that's ineligible. Hopefully that will make more sense, I think, with the example. And the property has to be acquired under eligible use B, C, or D. Again, this is that NSP 2 and 3 restriction under eligible use E. So you can use your E for NSP 1 only. Everything else is just B, C, or D. We also just want to make sure that since we're letting grantees dispose of properties for ineligible activities, we just want to make sure that you're documenting how the ineligible activity is going to contribute to neighborhood stabilization. We've said this, those activities, I guess, basically it has to meet a national objective. The ineligible activity has to meet a national objective. And we also want to make sure that if this activity, you had a planned reuse for this property that was in your action plan, and it has changed now because now you found out you can do ineligible activities. You just need to make sure that you've, under your action plan and gone through anything you need to go through to do a local amendment. So this example, through it one more time.
Right. Let me just point out that Jennifer a few minutes ago, which is that you haven't seen this before, is that you haven't seen this before. So this isn't in the closeout notice. This will be in the guidance that we published, and this is I think, some pretty good thing on how we get past this blockage here. So this idea of getting to an ineligible activity by saying the disposition is the eligible activity gives you that ability to kind of jump over that hurdle as long as being a national objective.
And if you wondered how I got here, it wasn't crazy talk. It's actually in the CDBG regulations in the eligible activities at 570-207. But
negative of the ineligible.
Right, it's a double negative, and we did some very serious thinking about it between the CDBG staff and the NSP staff working this out. But it rests on a very solid, long foundation in the CDBG program. And with these too, who were very helpful. Okay. But it still was magical, I think. Yeah.
All right, I'll help explain this concept a little bit better just to put it in a very specific example. So let's say you've acquired a property that is blighted. So you acquired under eligible use D, and let's say you put it on another eligible use. As long as it's blighted, you can move that acquisition cost to your eligible use D bucket. So now you've met an objective with your acquisition and demolition because of public safety hazard. So we've got an eligible activity, an eligible use, and we've met a national objective. Say to build a playground. Now a playground would qualify as a public facility.
Public improvement.
Public improvement. It's not an eligible CDBG activity. If you go to chart under eligible use D, that's not an eligible activity. So technically it's an NSP ineligible use, end use. So even if you've acquired and demoed and met a national objective, you now want to have a playground there. You can't use NSP funds for the playground. So you can't pay for the swings and the stuff actually going on the property. You can get funds for that. But because of the playground, you can show how it benefits the area, how it's an area, meets an area national objective. You've met an objective. So, and you can show, how it contributes stabilization in the same way. So you've met an objective for an eligible activity, essentially.
Right, and so all the small public works projects that you like to do fall into this category. Exactly the same logic here. So, swales, drainage ways, tot lots, open space, anything that is not eligible but benefits the low, moderate, and middle income neighborhood and is paid for with other funds, you can do. So I'm sure we'll get some questions on this, but if we have thought of anything, we want to hear about it now. So.
Yeah, and remember again, go back to those general principles about the only exception for this is that in NSP 2 and 3, if you acquire vacant property, you can't under eligible use E, and it only qualifies if it's vacant. It doesn't qualify for any other property types. You would not be able to do this because you got to dispose of that property as housing. So that's really the one case where there really isn't an exception.
Right. I think a lot were most problematic were those with demolition and then what questions.
Right. But if any of those other property types, you can move the acquisition to your other eligible use buckets, so you can do something like this.
So we move to.
Yeah.
So ways to do it. There's what if you run out of ways? How to do? What are your options?
Right. So this is the change of use regulation. CDBG uses at 570.05. And again, we just keep saying over and over, but you've got to make sure the use of grant funds meets the national objective. That should be, the focus. Say you acquired and demolished a property, you've met a national objective with those two things, but you're going to do something to that property that will no longer meet a national objective. What we do essentially is, well, maybe we should go to the next slide. We would come in and talk to your HUD field rep. Specifically, if the property was, we've got a little table in the next slide. So if you spent less than $25,000, if your total NSP investment in the acquisition and demolition of this property was under $5,000, there's a chance, assuming you've met the national objective with the acquisition and demo, that property could move out of the program. But what we want you to do is, if this is the case and you've got a lot of properties like this, we want you to talk to your HUD field rep, and we want to see how many properties we have that are in this bucket, essentially. So you spent less than $25,000 on the property, you met a national objective with your acquisition and your demo, and you can't continue to meet a national objective. If it's over $5,000, then you have to, and you cannot continue to meet a national objective, you've got to reimburse the NSP for the fair market value of that property. So sell it to one making luxury apartments, right, that no longer is going to meet an NSP national objective, then you've got to reimburse the program for that property's fair market value. In the third column, if you never met a national objective, let's say you demolished a property that you shouldn't have, like it was a single demolition, you couldn't prove that it was a public safety hazard, so you met a national objective on that property, you can't have any ideas for developing that property in a way that meets a national objective, is to reimburse NSP for all the money you've spent on that project. So it doesn't matter what your initial investment was, you just have to repay NSP for all of those funds.
Right, so it's the property that you bought and then couldn't dispose of for what you originally could. So those are the categories there. You met a national objective once, never met a national objective. And then depending on the dollar amount, if you never met a national objective, it doesn't matter how much you put into it. You need to reimburse the program all the costs, not your admin costs, but all the costs and related, fees and that sort of thing. So we've shown you 3 ways to meet to do an eligible activity and meet an eligible objective, even if the end use isn't eligible, and then this is the kind of cleanup category. So if it does fall into one of those previous categories, it'll fall into this category. And then our last slide, which I'm sure is going to become part of your wall decorations.
So this is, again, just a way to summarize all of this stuff. I think it's useful for me to think about this stuff in terms of your eligible use bucket, because that dictates, your property type dictates your eligible use, which then dictates what activity you can do. So we have it on here, what you can do under each eligible use if that's where the acquisition occurred, objectives to meet for those categories, and then some examples of what activities could be. Hopefully we got all the options on this table, and you can kind of take this table away, and it'll be a good cheat sheet to go back and say, okay, what can I do if I bought this property under eligible use E, and I can't, it's not foreclosed, I can't put it anywhere else. Or say I bought a property that was foreclosed and you want to move it to eligible use C, that acquisition, you can do that. So it's a good sort of wrap up for what's eligible under each eligible use bucket.
It looks like a board game to me. I think we should.
Right, there you go. Good checkers. For your
families at Christmas, yes.
Right.
Demolished house, the tree. So, so the probably 1 or 2 questions out there.
Indeed, and let's go directly to those. We've got James lined up here first, and let me unmute you, James. Hello.
Hey, James.
Hi. Yeah, it has to do with the case where you are moving to activity, whether it would be an eligible use or an ineligible use, to infuse CDBG funds into it, more likely in one that's not going to be eligible for NSP, but you're going to put, you're actually going to carry it out, let's say, economic development, with have to meet, as I understand it, the CDBG low mod rather than the low mod middle income for the jobs. And I guess the same would be the case with area benefit. You have the playground you were talking about earlier.
Right.
If you put CDBG funds into it, to worry about the 51% rather than 100
Right. That's
80%.
generally the restrictive rule applies, and so if you build a playground with funds, then your standard is higher.
Right. Okay.
Jim. And next, let's go to Sarah. So Sandra, perhaps you muted your own phone, or perhaps not. We'll come back, and let's go to who's next? Let's go to Donna. Hi.
There.
You, and where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Milwaukee, Pennsylvania.
Go ahead.
I'm doing. Thank you for the webinars. They've been very helpful. I think it seems to be a lot of information. We're trying to decipher it.
Right. Make you busy, you know.
Oh, that we are. So and I know earlier on, and I thought that in that earlier webinar on demolition, we had talked about these side lots and that have to meet an eligible end use. We're going to, a partner, and it seems that in this webinar we've changed to say that the initial eligibility of area benefit will now be okay. And the question that I want to confirm that and then go further, that if they have sold it to these adjacent homeowners, does that make a difference other than having to account for some program income?
So in this case, the eligible activity is disposition, which I think is a new sort of clarification, just because there is no side lot eligible activity, right? So we need an eligible activity. It is disposition. The real clarification that we're firm on now is that the negative is now an area benefit. So it does not have to do with the resident's income.
If it makes the area benefit.
Right. You've got to show how it meets the area benefit. It's easier if you demolish the property because you can show the area benefit that way. But you've got to show how it meets the area benefit, and that's the national objective.
Let me just clarify, because the initial was an acquisition with demolition because these were vacant, dilapidated structures. Input was a general threat to the public. Okay. And so when they dispose of it, we will just use the same LMMA benefit that we used under the acquisition for demolition.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're carving out room for that. Now, you've got to remember that until this notice came out, it was actually not in compliance to acquire for demolition. It was questions around that when we realized grantees were acquiring for demolition, even though it was not eligible in the original notice. That caused the long break where we've been all talking to each other, trying to figure this out and step through it and figure the long policy in the CDBG program under that ineligibility where we were trying to work out, what could fit there and what couldn't. So we're now saying that when you acquire for demolition, the acquisition cost is actually sliding in under that clearance activity, which is grantees that actually been reporting in DRGR anyway. Right. Become an allowable cost under the and we're now saying that you can then, you've met a national objective, then your next is disposition. If you can meet the same national objective, you can put it all on the same line for DRGR. If the disposition is going to go for a different national objective, you're going to have to create a new activity, of course.
Okay, for the clarification.
You're welcome.
you, Donna. And let's see, then we've got next Albert, who asks if you'll be developing a few best practices examples to demonstrate how these principles can be used, especially on how to meet the 3 eligibility requirements. And it looks like this slide that's up right now helps with that.
It's a good suggestion. We can.
Yeah, you can have.
One's done yet. Ineligible.
Yeah.
Yep.
We can come up with some cases when we get the policy that would be illustrative, hopefully, and you know, I think some of the ones that we make this presentation based as well, so that we're kind of racking our brains to come up with situations that we think you have on your hands out there. So, but
yeah, if people have examples they're thinking about or properties they've purchased and they want to run by a scenario by us, feel free to do that, because that'll just help us when we write the guidance.
we're coming right now.
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Very good. And who's up next? Looks like Karen is up, so let's get her. Karen?
Just trying to get a correlation. It looks like the regulations given are entitlement regulations, and I need to know the state regulations are that relate to those. So the regulation, it appears to be the entitlement one. Is there a state regulation?
Yeah, we're not state experts, but I'm pretty sure that you can do anything that you can do in the program, and then some. I don't believe the state has a specific list of, well, so eligible activities.
Well, the specific state regulations
right.
under CDBG. So that's why I'm, you know, whenever these webinars are done for, it defaults to that, but then we've got to go play hide and seek as to, if you mean this for entitlement, did you also mean this for the state? And that's something that we're not always on real firm ground.
Well, you know, we're always trying to maximally feasibly differential to your needs. I'm sure we can work something out on this. I mean, I think if it's part of CDBG regs for entitlements, you know, I mean, we're kind of adapting the CDBG regs as for this program, because we don't have, you know, categories for everything, and we refer to eligible activities. So I think, you know, we've making differences all along. I think that, you know, whatever you made originally still stands, and if you're having a problem with that, we can deal with this specifically if you want to write in or call us. But I'm sure we can work something.
You're not just going to send an email that says anything you want to do that we've said for entitlements good?
Maximum.
Okay, you're good. Thanks.
Yeah, but disposition is just an activity just like acquisition rehab. It's in the same eligible activities.
It's not in the 400, so.
Do that.
Right.
They can do acquisition and dem.
Right. Yeah, and even here, you know, as you can see when you read 57505, you know, there's going to be, I mean, you do have to go through a citizen notification process and some other things, and so the fits between this program and CDBG aren't always perfect. We try to make them work as well as we can, you know, and I think we're trying to kind of go with the intent of Congress here and make it work. So if you find yourself in a corner, just let us know, and we'll try to bail you out.
Jason asks, just to be clear, when a blighted home is acquired and demoed, a community can sell or donate the vacant land to the adjacent homeowner regardless of their income, as long as it's in a low, middle income area?
You have to demonstrate how that disposing it of a side lot meets that area that you've defined. So it can't just be, here's a circle, I'm circling the area, it's mod, boom, show how it's been, and you can do that if you have acquisition and demo, like his example, then with the show how you met the national objective, the area national objective, and that's going to carry on into the side lot.
Yeah, most side lot programs, I think, have requirements that the property maintain it, mow the grass and that sort of thing. So, is that's going to a positive impact on the neighborhood by, first you had a blight house, and then if you don't mow the grass, you could have a kind of crappy looking blighted lot. So the moving it to the neighbor and having the neighbor take care of it really does benefit the neighborhood.
Let's do Latoya. Hi, Latoya. Are you muted on your end?
Hello. My question, I forgot. Wait. P2, can we build a mixed-use housing building where commercial's at the bottom, maybe there's office space or a hair salon or a daycare or something like that with the residential units above?
What kind of property was it when you acquired it? What was the property type?
It was mixed use. I describe it. The city didn't really label it properly. Visually, it was mixed use. I think I had it as residential, but you could see that there were offices at the bottom.
And what?
They were closed and vacant.
Okay. So do both now with.
So you could do under right.
B.
This is a good question. So up till now we've been saying, well, you could do the housing, but you had to pay for the element separately, and now what we're saying is that potentially do both, and have then you need to meet a different national objective. Housing made for the housing. You're going to have some jobs or limited clientele or something like that for the commercial activity. But if it's a service, if it's a local retail type of facility, a lower middle income area, those are typically a benefit kinds of activities. The people aren't driving in from the other side of town to pick up a head of lead or whatever. So that's pretty feasible if you have the budget and if the property type works. So if it's NSP2, you couldn't do it under E, but since it was foreclosed, you could do it under B. And then, it sounds like your zoning allows one or another. Some of these properties I think may have to look at some zoning changes, but enough money you can make it work. And your writing should tell you how much you would need to put into how much you should put in and not subsidize it or under subsidize it. But it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, is kind of look to the that you're going to be developing and see, maybe it's the kind of commercial that's going to meet either the air national objective or the jobs national objective. One of those is probably where we want to find. So you just make sure you're meeting those national objectives if you put NSP money into the commercial.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Toya. And up is Martin. Let me get you up there, Martin. Hello.
Hello?
Hello. Doing what?
Question is the land bank properties. We have two properties that are all of the other properties. We purchased several properties that were designated housing. We have two properties that are listed in the land bank that we believe can be used for parks, but wasn't sure if that was still eligible under the new disposition requirements.
We assume it was foreclosed upon. It meets the criteria to be in a land bank. So there's properties. So if you're in a land bank, then yes, you can use disposition, which is a correlated eligible activity, as the sort of terminal use of funds for or the terminal activity, and then the subsequent activity is ineligible because it meets a national objective, so it's in a moderate income, and you with somebody else's money, then.
Okay.
That park meets a national objective, you can build with other funds, just not NSP funds, in that case.
Works.
Okay?
I mean, you got, something like community gardens or even small parks. I mean, that could be donated labor too. Just a sweat equity kind of thing. So as long as, as long as it's NSP money, you're fine.
We don't use NSP money for the construction of the parks.
Okay. Yeah, then you're good.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, man. We'll go now to Katie. Katie.
Hello?
There you go. Hi.
Hi. I just had a question regarding the side, when you're using use C for properties that were acquired, demolition was conducted, or maybe the property was foreclosed and acquired as a vacant lot. And if and in the MMA area, not necessarily the neighbor next door that wants to acquire the property because they live in the neighborhood, but they be able to know, to either put a garden or just keep the cut as part of their own neighborhood stabilization efforts of the community. Are they eligible to, could we use that end use activity to sell to somebody not immediately next door, or would it fall under that last category?
That's a tough one.
You're helping us. Sort of philosophically, I don't have a problem with it, but you could sort of imagine this could get out of control too. So, or somebody might decide to use it for, casino or something. But
well, if it's zone, obviously you're in a residential neighborhood.
No, I'm just kidding.
What you could do, if the property, I don't know who you are, but if the property values are really low where you are, you could search for fair market value, assuming you acquired and demolished and met a national objective in that way.
Right.
You could sell for fair market value to that person, and then that would be program income.
Sell it for below fair market value as long as you've got something for it, I guess. But kind of got this kind of trade-off against private benefit versus net benefit.
Yeah. If they're in the area, let me give a little background. We really, for the property where we've worked, that we've just eliminated blight, we've improved the neighborhood by getting rid of the structure. We immediately offered the properties to the neighbors. We sent them notification and given them the opportunity, an application, and with previous guidance of if they're eligible income to be the beneficiary of these properties. And I think due to that, some of that within the neighborhoods, it's interest from other people that also live in the area that said, well, if this person doesn't want it, I'd be interested in taking it as well. And so there's been a little bit of a stir of interest, which is good. But it's also kind of gray area as far as making sure we're meeting the national objectives with that disposition of those properties.
Yeah. Do you have to sell it to them? Could you just let them for it? Are they interested in maintain more than just making sure that it gets maintained, or do they really want to have ownership for some reason?
I think with each that's interested, we've had a couple that hired, and we've kind of taken their information as an application, but haven't necessarily acted on it yet. Our board is still reviewing the applications, but.
Well, if you could do this, I think it would be helpful. if you could ask a question and put right at the beginning of your question direct to HUD, and those to us, and we look at those every week. And the questions that don't answer yet, so that we can maybe talk to Arnie about this and see what she says too.
Okay.
Because I try to make it work. It's kind of I could see some pluses and minuses both. And so I'd rather not give you a sort of on the spot answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kate. And now let's go to Shonda, who is actually a panelist on last week's Peer-to-Peer Strategies webinar. Hi, Shonda.
Hi, how are you?
Well,
I'm just, if this is redundant, I'm trying to be real clear for what we're doing. We've, as you mentioned, we've acquired land with the purpose of demolishing structures, residential structures that are just dilapidated to a point that rehab is just not feasible. Structures in most cases were inhabited by transients who were doing drugs, exactly similar as you mentioned earlier. And it itself wasn't safe, some of them leaning over. So what I'm hearing is that our acquisition of that land and the subsequent demolition of the structure, we're good at NSP point, is a national objective, and our environment could possibly end at that point, and we would be free to then dispose of that lot, now vacant lot, in another way that we saw fit. It doesn't necessarily have to be used. We don't necessarily have to reconstruct housing on that, and limited to low mod housing.
Right. If you acquired it,
yeah,
and demolished it, and it was a blighted property, it can be an eligible use D bucket. You've met a national objective, and so now what happens is, depends on what your subsequent use is on that property, and whether it's going to be, an eligible activity that we talked about that meets a national objective, or an eligible activity that meets a national objective. Those are kind of your options.
Okay. There's, I think we're okay on 99% of our lots. There's a couple that are, it was so important that we just demo that structure, that, and now we're kind of like, well, what
do you do with it? Right.
So, yeah. Okay, we are free to dispose of that in another way.
Yeah,
Okay.
just as we described. So,
okay, just so I was understanding correctly.
Thanks.
Thanks for Shonda. And Donna submits that a home is purchased and demolished under Activity D. It met a national objective under Activity D. Constructed using other funds. Sold to a person with an income in excess of 120% of AMI. An acceptable end use.
Well, it doesn't mean a national objective is a problem. So you're into the graph at the end on a change of use. So so then it's going to matter. So you've met a national objective once with the demolition, presumably. So the activity that doesn't meet a national objective, then comes the question: is it over? You have over $25,000 into it, or under $25,000? If you have over $25,000, then you just have to sell it for current appraised value. If it's at $25,000, your field office may, and you don't have a million of them, your field office may just put that out of the program.
That original investment on the acquisition and the demo, because it sounds like they didn't use any NSP money on the house. So it's just that initial, how much NSP money do you have in that property? And if it's less than $25,000,
right,
talk to your field office, see if you can just take it out of the program. Also come to us, and we'll have that conversation. And if that's the case, if they spend less than $25,000, which probably in a lot of these cases is going to be hopefully true, then you can take it out of the program. If not, then easier to reimburse, sell it for fair market value if they've already built the house.
Well, you could, reimburse the program for the market value of the land. So that would be what we would,
Or reimburse for what they spent on that acquisition and demo.
Right. Well, yeah, I don't know. They're probably about the same number in most cases, but if you did meet national objective, you could conceivably sell it for current market value. Again, just the land itself. So.
Yeah, I might want to write in to ask a question just to tell us more details if this is an actual case and not a hypothetical, so we can talk about what the next step would be.
Thanks for that question, Adana. And let me circle back to Sandra, see if she's there now. Hi, Sandra. Very
Sorry
good.
about
Welcome.
earlier. Thank you. Actually, 2 questions. First question is if the economic development and public facilities activities were not included in our application to the state of California, they weren't noticed, they weren't addressed in the public hearing, or not in the standard agreement, to do anything under public facilities or economic development without having to renotice it and an agreement to the standard agreement, amendment to the standard agreement.
Yeah, you have to follow whatever state, procedure is required or whatever local.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got to follow what the state. I definitely think that if the states aren't on here and they're not let them know that this is sort of new options, and hopefully they'll help you add that to your activities.
What chances are that if it's a state grant, this is going to be NSP 1 or 3. There's
it's NSP 1.
Reasonably, as far as from HUD's standpoint, anyway, relatively easy to make that kind of a change. But state different requirements. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we expect that some of these will require changes, whether you're a state subrecipient or just a direct grantee. So.
Okay. Other question is, we have a house that we assisted with state home funds several years ago. The house has now burnt down. The property taxes are delinquent. The family is nowhere to be found. Can we foreclose, demo, rebuild, and resell all with NSP-PI? Would that be possible?
Yeah, I don't know what Home's rules are as far as whether they to get anything out of that transaction or not.
I think that's the real question. I think that's actually more of a Home question than an NSP question, because you'd want to, you weren't in sort of non-compliance with the home money.
I've seen grantees foreclose on previously assisted properties, so it's possible to do, but I don't know I can't get one that was home assisted that I could use as an example of that. So I would check with whoever runs the home program for the state or however you work it, and see what they say.
When we foreclose on the property, wouldn't we ask for, say we cured the delinquent property taxes, in their notice to the public, wouldn't it, the house is being sold for, the funds that the county has actually put into this property, so wouldn't the home funds be included
in
the auction price?
Well, no, all that stuff gets blown out by the foreclosure, so that's why I think you want to, there isn't some other requirement on top of that from the home side.
Okay, I'll check with the state home reps on that. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Sandra. And let's see. That brings now, going back down the list to Latoya with a follow-up question. Hi, Latoya.
Would we need to amend our action plan to have that mixed-use building
Yeah,
Good.
yeah, you need to add special economic development activities to your action plan. So yeah, to
So then one?
And it's
Oh, NSP2, yeah. Well, that will take a little longer.
yeah. It might be something that happen at the field office level. We'll probably have a conversation here, but yeah, it is a change since we're adding a new activity. There's really no way to get around that. So I don't know if we'll have to like repanel or anything like that for NSP2, but you'll have to advertise it and all that stuff to let everyone in your local area know that you're adding a new activity.
Yeah, so if you have time, I mean, if it's something you could do after the spending deadline with program income, that would probably be a little bit, more man way to do it if you have that option.
because I think all we have left now is program income.
Okay.
So to do things this with program income, but if we need to do the plan, I want to get ahead of it.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Going now, we're going to one question, and Wendy asks if a grantee has many properties land banked that have less than $25,000 invested, they should work with the office to determine if they can take a property out of the program under CDBG Safe Harbor.
Well, I think those are the kind of situations that we want to avoid. It's just that the change of use was written with, limited circumstances in mind, and it's been used quite sparingly over the years. So, having a kind of wholesale exodus of properties, assets with federal funds in them, just doesn't, just not the headline test. So.
Properties, they have that other reuse requirement. So you do have a reuse plan in place. So those land bank properties, they're a little different. You're meeting an LMMA national objective, but if all you're doing is land banking, that's an interim national objective, the way the notice describes it. So that is not sort of the final straw for those properties if all you've done is land banking them.
This is the kind of situation where we should sit down and we can get on a conference call with your office and really try to understand that. I don't think there's there's a few communities out there that are going to have this situation, and we want to understand those in the best way possible. It might be possible to let some properties out, but we want to do it in a careful, thoughtful way. And so, something up so that we can talk it through with you, understand what's going on, and see what the best situation we can arrive at would be.
Stephanie, I think, looks like, their hands up. Let's go to Stephanie.
I'm with the City of St. Pete, and I had a question regarding P3 of blighted structures. When the property has not been acquired, we'd been under the NSP program, NSP1, we'd been acquiring the property that was blighted and then demolishing it. UP funds, and it seems like from today's program that some communities are actually demolishing properties that the city does not own.
Right.
Be like, so the codes department, or it has actually gone through the whole condemnation order and the public hearings and all that kind of stuff to condemn the property, and then the demolition's paid for.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's, some places have laws that are, that expedite that. In most states, that takes a long time, and it, isn't something that happens easily. But I know Ohio has a very a law in that respect. So, but I think that's part of the problem is that people have want to tear down, but they can't afford to go 3 years worth of legal process to get them, so they just buy them, and then then they found out they were kind of stuck.
Right. Well, yeah, we've got a little bit of both going on here, because also in the meantime there have been so many condemnation cases that financially it's difficult for the city to afford to do all those. So by the time a property that's in the NSP area, that's one that we may not have been able to acquire or wasn't on our original, we haven't targeted it, and it's at the top of the condemnation list now. It's gone through all the process and it's ready to go down. I could use NSP-3 point, demolish it, and then so now once I've for demolition of a property that I don't own, am I meeting the third piece? So I'm eligible use. I've a national objective, but now how do I dispose?
Right.
There is no.
Right. You're not acquiring, so there's no
right.
question. It's really the easiest way to do this. I mean, if there are grantees out there that have money they need to expend, this is a really good way to do it, because you go through the demo. So, eligible use, it's eligible use D, it's a blighted property. Your eligible activity is demolition, and your national objective is met, by either doing a single demo that we talked about or the cluster demo. Either way, you can meet the national objective, and you're done.
That's it.
So there is no disposition since there's no acquisition, and it's a really in there.
I'm sorry, but explain the national objective at the end again. So if I'm one in our smaller NSP-3 neighborhood area, I'm doing a cluster.
So if you know that you're doing a cluster in an NSP neighborhood, we're kind of as part of a neighborhood revitalization plan. Usually we'll want to see preservation units in there too, like maybe you're doing some, thing in that area.
Of course.
So you're benefiting the neighborhood, you're benefiting that area that you're going to define. So you can meet an objective that way. You just want to make sure you're documenting in the file the area and then the activities that are happening, so it's clear that you're meeting that objective.
And if you've gone through this entire process of the public process, pretty much that's going to be a dangerous building. I don't think they're going to go all the way through that process with a marginal property. So it most probably meet the criterion of
public safety.
Safety, public health and safety. And you've met the national objective with the demolition, and you're out of it. That's end of story.
Yeah, you can do it either way. Yeah, it sounds like since you're going through the code enforcement stuff, you're probably right. It's easier to do it that way.
Well, yeah, I hadn't done that, but today I was thinking, well, my gosh, in NSP-3, maybe that is the way. When they get, that are at the top of the list and they're ready to be demolished by the codes department, we could, substitute the NSP-3 money. My second question is, it seems like there is in between on the time frame for that's been demolished in the land bank. You've got 10 years from your closeout to position final use, but if you did construction, you have to reconstruct immediately, and understanding that immediately in Florida is not immediate as we had originally anticipated, because program income coming in is less because the market is not coming back as quickly, and because the market back as quickly, we're and staff. I mean, we're not the immediate part of the building under CAT is a little bit more trying, and as program income comes in, we're rolling, but we're not getting as much program income as we originally anticipated, and the appraised values are not coming in as high, and the market's not coming back. So our intent for immediately is a little slower than I thought, but obviously I don't want it to sit for 10 years past the closeout either.
Yeah. No, when we were talking about doing reconstruction or construction, that's basically when you can qualify the demo separately. That's only when it has to be immediate. If you have a property.
But that's what I'm saying. There's no in between from how one defines immediate versus 10 years from closeout if you're putting it in the land bank because it met the blighted.
If it met it, then it's fine.
If it was kind of,
right. Yeah.
We didn't meet the blighted.
Okay. And demolished because it was a blighted property, and then you're going to build on it someday. That's okay because you can met the national objective with the demo.
Acquired and demolished a property that was feasible, not marketable, and you're reconstructing it. The idea is to reconstruct, but capacity-wise, we can't construct all of them immediately, right?
Well, yeah, and so we said under this question came up more under redevelopment under Use E, but the principle is the same.
Yeah, same thing, right?
That we're looking at like a year to 2 years, So I think once if you can't do something with it within a year, 18 months or something like that, then you need to start thinking about putting it in your land bank. Now, it was a foreclosed property, but
foreclosed. But the question is, some of them. I don't know that we didn't really intend for all of them to be declared to be the end use being the demolition. We wanted to reconstruct them all, but
used NSP money to do the demolition already.
Sure.
Well, until you dispose of them, you're not really you're not obliged to do something else. I'm sure you don't want to own them forever, but this becomes how you go, before you really start thinking about calling it a land bank property.
Mm-hmm.
The land bank, I think, is just there because, it's a category that doesn't exist in CDBG because you're expecting something to happen in CDBG, and so you work on something for a year or two, and then you have a product. If it goes beyond that, you just need this kind of safety net of the land bank.
Okay.
It's not a great place to be. I grant you. So.
No, I think most meet the definition of blighted, but I guess I hadn't really separated. They were all foreclosed.
Yeah.
And I guess I hadn't really separated real well the land bank versus the reconstruct because we intend to reconstruct on even the land bank ones.
Yeah. I think, I just think if they're not blighted and you used NSP money to demolish them, that's probably something we should talk about. How many properties is it? How long it's going to be before the reconstruction starts?
Right.
So it might be a good question to write into the Ask a Question box so we can kind of talk about it a little bit more.
Okay.
Thanks, Stephanie. Right now, I just looking at this photo, I realized that's in my neighborhood. Not far away at all. Took me a minute to figure that out, though. Let's go to Ahmad. Hi, Ahmad.
Hello, how are you?
Where are you calling
from?
Okay.
I'm calling from New Jersey.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. My question was that one of our non-subrecipients acquired and demolished a hazardous structure that was also a drug den. They plan to affordable units. It's a habitat, so the streams of resource didn't come in fast enough for them to be able to complete these properties because they planned on developing them, constructing on them. But the objective and things that we're able to donate these properties to the subrecipient so that they can on the construct on the properties later.
They're going to do affordable housing that would meet an NSP national objective?
Yeah, be later, like 5 years, maybe 3 to 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Becomes a little bit of a terms of whether we could close out the grant before you do that. That's kind of the more significant limit. I mean, and I'm sure there's plenty of other communities in the same situation. So.
But I mean, they think if so, it was a public safety hazard. So when they did the acquisition and demolition, you can check that an area national objective.
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, the national objective. It kind of depends on the timing of the closeout and when you do the donation.
So do you have a land bank?
No.
Okay.
Well.
Yeah, I don't know there's a way to figure that out. Well, you don't have to have a land bank necessarily. I mean, it could be a municipal, it could be city or state or something owned temporarily. But it starts getting too far out. It might be worth having something that you designate as a land bank so that you can put into that kind of holding pattern and still close your grant out. But there isn't a timeline for closing the grant. So I mean, if you manage to do it in 3 years, it might be okay. But it starts going like 5 years. I don't know.
Close it out without final disposition.
Well, I think you might close it out with area benefit national objective met.
Yes. And
so you've met that national objective. You can close out, and then just know you have to continue to track that property. If you need it to habitat, you have to track it to make sure it continues to meet a national objective. So in that case, it would be a housing national objective. So you just have to, like any property after closeout or treated, you just have to make sure it meets the national objective.
Yeah, that's true. I think we're working out a lot of those kind of situations, Ahmed. It's just, I haven't thought it all through yet, but I think Jen's right. That it's more. It's feasible to just sort of post closeout requirement and then track it that way than to hold everything up. But since we haven't had anybody out yet, we haven't gotten experience yet. But
donate that property that soon, or are you thinking wait to do that for a while, or?
If we can get it closed out, I would like to donate it right away.
Okay. Maybe this is. Sorry.
I'm going to ask my rep, but I just want to ask since I'm on the.
Yeah.
Well.
I think it's ask a question.
Yeah.
I think just with these specific cases, I think so we can kind of all get on the same page. If you go to the resource exchange and hit submit a question, ask a question, so we can have it, and then we can follow up with you and make sure that donating to Habitat will be sufficient or not. We can follow up with you.
Okay. Much.
Thanks.
I'm sure they'll do it. I just don't
logistically
exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Going back to Stephanie's point on the last one, I guess I didn't catch that. It was some of these were not blighted, perhaps. So the timing question becomes a little more crucial. But that'd be something that we have to work through with the field office and just look at the particular, the number of the condition they were in, and try to see, because I think a lot of markets have not, performed the way people thought they would, and so, I think they're finding themselves in these binds through no fault of their own, really, but it does create a kind of a dilemma from a regulatory standpoint. So we want to try to slice through that.
So up next is Hugo. Hi, Hugo, you're unmuted.
I wrote my question there. Sorry, I'm on something else.
Go ahead.
So I'm with the City of Modesto, and we have a standalone NSP demo activity. Couple that with the code enforcement mechanism that the presenters, the panelists alluded to earlier. But a specific case that I wanted to present to the panelists, it's a property that's owned by a JPA that includes the City of Modesto. It's located in a low-income census tract. It's located in a target area. And I be part of the code enforcement process at the city because it's owned by the city, but I wanted to inquire as to the eligibility and meeting the national objective of that case.
Yeah, we're not as concerned with ownership in that case. It meets the definition of blighted, and like you said, it's in your target area, and it's in a low mod middle income area.
So the appropriate documentation be photographs and maybe a narrative of how it represents a hazard, public safety.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's eligible, and the demolition would in itself meet the national objective,
right.
LMMA. Oh, very well. That was all. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Hugo. And let's go now to, this came in, now let's go to Rita.
CDB question without NSP dollars involved. I'm with the County of Los Angeles, and my question pertains to properties that were acquired and demolished with CBG funds to remove slum blight. Does the vacant land need to meet a national objective when it's disposed?
If you've acquired property and torn it down as a blighted property in a CDBG program, what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so no. I mean, you've met your national objective with the slum and blight. I don't really know what CDBG says about the subsequent use of that property. What are you trying to do with it?
We have a few properties that we were not able to assemble into a larger site. And so we have single sites that we cannot pursue a large project due to the limited funds that we have now. So we are intending to dispose, or we're looking at our options to dispose of those single sites that have a national objective through the removal of slum blight. But through the disposition process, we're not sure what the end use will be. We're not sure or clear if we need to meet a national objective at the time that we dispose of the sites.
Yeah, I think you probably do, but not positive. I think you would probably want to check in with your office there. Alanian, who's our NSP specialist in the Los Angeles office, might be a good crossover person there to talk to. But, I mean, I think that the philosophy is the same, but just haven't seen to think about these things enough to give you a definitive answer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think once you spent the property and, it's sort of in your program. So if, national objective changes, you probably are going to have to another one, but
yeah, change of use, and you
right.
just reimburse or at whatever level, which might not I mean, if somebody's in a national or a use that doesn't meet a national objective, presumably they can afford to pay you what the property's worth, and you just reimburse the program. So it's
okay.
probably doable. I'm pretty sure there is going to be that requirement.
Okay, because we're trying to tune into your webinar to get some guidance, as usually CDBG and NSP have similar signs that we were hoping we could get the response. But
True. We should know the answer to that, but we don't. Sorry.
with our field office as you suggested then.
Okay. You're welcome.
Thanks, Rita. And looking at the moment, there are no more questions, but let me tell you a couple things, see if any more come in. This webinar is being recorded, and the archive is usually very quick to be posted. It'll include an AV recording of the webinar along with PDF of the presentation. And a written transcript always gets there, but takes just a little bit longer. As you might imagine, it takes a while to get through and transcribe all of this talking. And coming up soon, well, no sooner than next year, but in January, we've got 3 NSP webinars scheduled on these topics. And you can go to the Resource Exchange in the Learning Center to get more details on these, and that's always a good place to check to see what else gets added to the schedule. And so we've got at least these 3 to look forward to next month, 2013. When you do leave the webinar today, you'll be redirected to SurveyMonkey form, and we would appreciate if you take just a couple minutes to answer those questions. The numeric responses are easy to do, and any comments you give us are especially valuable to us. So we hope you take a moment to fill that out, and we'll thank you in advance for doing so.
Kent, let me mention here that the comments that you put in there should really be about the webinar. If you have questions or program questions or concerns or something like that, you really need to write them into the question, because the evaluation form just doesn't reach in time to be able to respond to it.
Good point. It's not for programmatic questions. For those, use Ask a Question on the NSP Resource Exchange. Still see no more questions, so let me just take this opportunity to thank our panelists, Jennifer Hilton and John Laswick in particular, also David Nera and Hunter Kurtz and Jesse Hanforth-Combe. Oops, typo on your Jesse, I apologize. But the for Jesse is correct. And thank you all for being here. Any final words, any of you over there at HUD?
Holiday season, everyone, and we'll see you here.
Terrific. Okay, thanks for being here, everybody, and take care. Bye-bye.